Welcome to the 32nd episode of the Decentralized Opportunity podcast. I'm your host, Tanner Lytle, here with your other host,
Wyatt Carson. 32nd. It feels weird. We done this 32 times, Tanner?
Yeah, once a week.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I know we're once we get to that 52 or that 1 year episode, it's gonna be so fun. We're gonna have to do something special.
Yeah, or hit triple digits. It'll be here before you know it.
Oh dear, you're right. Crazy. Well, anyways, let's just jump in. So obviously we don't have an interview this week. We're working on lining up several others. I hope you've enjoyed several of the interviews we've had in the past. I think I'm starting to get compliments and comments about the podcast more often. I know you have, Tanner. I think you have a bigger network than me. But I'm starting to receive comments and feedback on the podcast. And I just want to, for example, I received a couple comments about the unemployment episode we did a couple back, 2 episodes, and all very positive. I had people reach out to me on LinkedIn and message me and say, hey, I just wanted to say I appreciate you kind of being so vulnerable and talking about, I think the key on the unemployment podcast that hit with a lot of people was humility. And I think so many people experienced a sudden dose of humility they weren't expecting that it resonated. And I'm starting to hear those back. So I love the feedback we're getting. And I just want to encourage people to reach out more. It's not an ego stroke for us. I mean, a little bit, but for the most part, it's a learning opportunity. I love to hear compliments, don't get me wrong, but if you have critiques and things we could change or suggestions, I would love to hear those as well from our audience. But I love the audience getting more vocal, and that makes me really happy and encourages us to continue on to that triple digit episode, right?
Exactly. Quite a few people shared their stories with me. My mom was one of them. She listens to our podcast, and she had a similar situation with COVID. The business she'd worked at for over 15 or more years, they closed their physical location, and she had to find a new job. And thankfully, there were better things at the end of the tunnel, but there was a lot of fear and uncertainty. And she took a lot from your story, Wyatt, which is pretty great, of just going through those things, not knowing what to do, and yeah, it just really clicks. So yeah, I appreciate you doing that. And we seem to learn just so much with every episode. And I think that's kind of our theme for this one, right? Is we're going to take a little bit of a retrospective on concepts that guests have shared or topics that we discussed, and kind of put them into a practical application that maybe someone could use.
Absolutely. No, that's exactly it. So I was kind of brainstorming ideas for this week, and I kept coming back to what was a very generic topic idea, which is rural e-commerce. Okay, cool. But the reason I was obsessed with this is, after our interview with Dan, and then our interview with Lindsay, and the interviews with so many people from Binkelman and Curtis and all these crazy remote places that most people have never heard of. I felt proud. And by that, I mean, there are people working their butts off to make a living and to live the way they want, and making it work and overcoming those challenges. And it's really inspiring from someone who is the definition of a wantrepreneur. I hate that word. It seems so diminutive, but I think for me, I'm allowed to call myself that. I won't call anyone else that. You, Tanner, you are an entrepreneur. I'm like the person who studies it on the sidelines. But it's really starting to get inspiring for me. And like, man, they made it happen. And I'm doing some quick math during some of these interviews. I'm like, man, not only are they making it happen, but some of these people are probably making bank. And so I just wanted to kind of talk about that. And I said e-commerce because e-commerce in my head is everything. If you sell a product, service, or whatever online, if that product is a physical product like a pen, or a digital product like a course or a white paper or something like that, if you sell something or a service online, you're in e-commerce. And since we are decentralized opportunity, we try and talk about the more rural areas that business is starting up. The answer is e-commerce, unless you want to start a uh, a small town, a floral shop or something like that, that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to scale, you have to get on the internet, right? I mean, it's 2023. We're all on it in some way, shape, or form. But if you want to scale any sort of business, you have to productize on the internet. And you're instantly in e-commerce. Congratulations, right? Um, so I'm just going to dive in. I tried to temper this. If I wrote an outline for a podcast episode, it would just be full of statistics and no one would listen to me. So I had to temper this, but I'm going to give you one statistic. I think this is the only one I'm going to give you. So Q1 of 2023, the data's in from the U.S. Census Bureau. They saw e-commerce retail sales of $1.8 billion in the United States in Q1. Of that $1.8 billion, 15% of that, 272 million of that, was small business e-commerce. And so I sat back and I was like, is that a significant number? Is 15% of overall retail in the country a significant number? And the answer is a resounding yes, especially when you consider who the big business retailers are, the Walmarts, the Amazons, the eBays, those sort of things. Costco, they all sell online. They're all part of the e-commerce as well. And they take up that other 85%. But 15% of everything that was bought online came from a small business in Q1. What do you think of that number, Tanner?
I think it has a lot of room to grow. And and just the way that I believe our economy is going to be going, especially with a lot of these new technologies and leverage that people are going to have, I think that their piece of the pie for small business is going to increase and not decrease, because the small guys are going to have a lot of the tools and capabilities that the large guys have now. And we're also going to be moving into a lot more personalized service and personalized value that before a lot of the commodity type services just couldn't offer. So I'm really excited for the future, and I think there's a big opportunity on it. And what you touched on with e-commerce specifically is that scalability. If you're in a small town, your options are limited. If you're going to be selling a specific product or service just to your local community, well, by nature, you're in a small town, so there's fewer people than if you're living in a larger metro area. But e-commerce gives you access to everybody. And because everyone's accessing it through the internet or through an app or through a different platform such as eBay, Etsy, whatever, they don't care where you're at, where you're located. If anything, if you're central Nebraska, it might be advantageous because central part of the country lets you ship pretty much anywhere across the country at a much quicker time. But you could be in the East Coast, you can be on the West Coast, you can be here in Nebraska, and you can have access to the same amount of people that anyone else does. And that's a huge, huge thing that I believe more and more people will take advantage of. And I'm excited to kind of talk with you on what kind of things that people should be doing, perhaps best practices or common faults, different pieces that from our perspective, as well as some of the lessons that people have talked about over the last few episodes, that they can find success within an e-commerce business.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question. You made a comment about the little people getting the tools of the big guys. What do you mean by that? What tools do the big guys have that people are starting to get on their home computers or in their home now?
It mostly comes to analytics. Information is king. And before, if you were a small business, you really only had limited amount of tracking, and it's usually what you could do in a spreadsheet or QuickBooks. You really didn't have a lot of the insights from your websites or from to your stores that the big guys do. I mean, it's crazy the amount of information retailers have, even just with cameras marketing the traffic to each aisle and the density and what people are looking at. Everything you do in a big store is tracked. And small businesses just didn't have that. So they were working off of just assumptions, intuitions, and blind luck sometimes, just imprecise ways of doing it. But now, especially with e-commerce, with things like Google Analytics, Salesforce, different forms of, like, I guess any form of CRM or sales platform can give you an insane amount of information from what sites are being, or what pages are being clicked, what products are being looked at, customers who are coming back to things, serving all sorts of different types of ads. But now we're having these new AI services being able to take all this information and parse it out to you in very understandable ways, or just kind of fine tuning things automatically for you. And that was stuff that only a few years ago, even the Walmarts and the J.C. Penney's and the giant retailers, the Amazons themselves, didn't have access to a few years ago. And now everybody is. So it's a really neat opportunity to get in now.
Absolutely. You said data is king, and I completely agree. In the true nature of this podcast, I'm going to completely ignore my outline and immediately jump to the best practice. What should you be doing? You should be learning data analytics. And I'm not saying you have to go get a Cornell certificate on it and become a master data analytics or a business intelligence analyst or anything crazy like that. If you want to, cool. But you're spot on. Salesforce, Zapier, Zoho, all of these amazing services that do wonderful things for businesses out there now come preloaded. Google Analytics comes preloaded with pretty graphs and numbers. It's very easy to lose yourself in data and get lost. And suddenly that data is as worthless as not having any data at all. But best practice number one of the show, of this episode, if you're in business, you need to understand data, and not only just the data that's available to you, you need to understand the data that's valuable to you. I think I talked about it previously. I have a 4 KPI, key performance indicator kind of rule for any company, any business, any division, whether it's a giant, Fortune 50 company or a brick and mortar shop in a town of 400. KPIs are essential, and identifying what's important to you, to your business, not just what's available, because you can get data on anything. My philosophy is, I think I've said it, but I'll say it again. It's an acronym called QDIP, which stands for quality, delivery, inventory, and productivity. Quality is pretty simple. Are you producing a service or a product that the customers will enjoy, whatever that may be? Delivery, I consider delivery as like lead time. How long does it take me to produce my product or service? Inventory should be self-explanatory. If you are producing a product, inventory is visual. Oh, I have a shelf full. I have 100 doodads on a shelf. I need to sell those. That's my inventory is 100 right now. If you provide a digital product, inventory could be outstanding orders. It could be return calls, whatever the thing is. I always define inventory as when you leave work at the end of the day, what's still on your plate that's just going to be there tomorrow. That's inventory. And then the fourth metric that I try and break everything down to is productivity. That could be productivity of an individual worker. If you've ever worked in a manufacturing line, you'll know that they love data as well, and data down to the most minute piece as possible. And sometimes that's the individual operator. You can do that if that's valuable. Depends on your industry and your job. But productivity could also be how many orders you're pushing a day. You receive 100 orders and you only box 50 orders. You're not being productive. Well, you're 50% productive. That's a very simple metric. Don't take that as a metric you should use in your business. But what I'm trying to say is, if you can identify those 4 key data principles: quality, delivery, inventory, and productivity, you have everything at your disposal to see how your business is running, and more importantly, to see what you can improve to make your business better. So everyone, learn data. There's lots of wonderful ways to go out and do that. Google has a data and analytics certificate. That might be a bit overkill for a lot of people. LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, all of those have wonderful 60 to 90 minute videos explaining not just what data is, but how you can use it to your benefit. And I think people get lost in the mass amounts of data sometimes.
I love that. So I think the rest of the podcast should just be kind of going into those 4 sections, because those really tap into each key piece for you to deliver something special and find success on e-commerce. But also we can tie into a lot of the lessons that we've learned from previous guests on each of those. So the first one is quality. how you show yourself to the world online makes a huge difference. And what you sell to the world is pretty much the key to your success. How much value are you going to bring in the services you offer for the amount of price that you're going to give them? Dan last week was talking about selling pain, and
Hmm.
it's not a negative thing. It's everyone themselves has some sort of pain that they're experiencing or an itch that you can scratch with your product or service. So it's really tapping into what is the world truly needing and what that you can deliver to them. And so in determining that product, I guess, Wyatt, how would you say someone should go about finding that? Or what's a good measurables in your opinion to identify if you maybe have something worth building a business off of and trying to.
Okay, so kind of testing is what you're alluding to. Absolutely. So, today, in today's world, we're so connected, and I think people. I don't want to be on the theme of people being overloaded, but they are. Same with data. Excuse me. The world is so connected, and I think people utilize that connectedness in ways that are just for kind of leisure and relaxation and maybe some learning, and that's wonderful. That's great. Everyone needs those things. But the power and attention of the world is potentially at your fingertips. And now I'm not saying that you're going to put a post on Facebook and the world's going to see it and respond. But every one of us has some form of social media. Probably if you don't, good for you, but most people do. Throw it out there. That's one lesson I think you and I have talked a lot in the last 32 episodes, kind of on the side between episodes, is at least for me, it's been eye-opening, the power of asking people. Probably a fear of mine since childhood, never wanting to be a burden or bother someone, has led to maybe just being like, oh, they wouldn't be interested in being on this podcast, or oh, they wouldn't have a perspective on this. Asking. And this goes the same way with testing and identifying if you have an idea out there. First off, before you do anything, go online. It's really easy. Try and find someone who's already doing what you're doing. If you have a brand new idea that no one else in the world is doing, it's probably not a good idea. I'm sorry. And I know people don't want to hear that, but we're not inventing the light bulb here anymore. We are in 2023. We have AI on iPhones. We are an advanced society in regards to businesses and all of that leads with that. Go online, find people who are already doing what you're doing. If you can find people who are doing what you're doing, you almost validated your idea. Now, don't get me wrong. If you want to start a search website and you find out that Google also provides that, you're probably not going to be very competitive against Google. You have to have some sort of, what's the word? You want to kind of center yourself in that. But if there are other businesses, if there are other people anywhere in the world providing the exact same service or something really close, that's check one of validation, man.
Yeah. Well, so much of it is usually just a special twist off of an established concept, right? It's maybe 80% is something that's been done before, but the 20% that's new is what really makes it transformational. And I was reading a book recently. It's this new one called 10X by Dan Sullivan, and it's not the Grant Cardone kind of MLM one, but this new one that talks about rather than trying to go small time, maybe like 2xing from where you're at, if you shoot for 10x, it leads you down a different path. But what was interesting, or at least one of the interesting, many interesting points, but one of the key takeaways I have recently is to get 10x the return, you don't have to do 10 times more things. You only have to be 10% better or 15% better, because to all the spoils go to the top. Also, the actual reward you get, and I think this was from an interview with Mr. Beast. He was talking about when Mr. Beast was on Joe Rogan, and he said it's way easier to get a video with 5 million views than it is 50 videos with 100,000 views. And you don't put in 50 times the work to get the 5 million. That video only has to be just slightly better than everyone else to make them want to watch that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I love what you're saying is start to find something that is somewhat established that you know that actually has a use case, and then just asking people. Oh my gosh, I love that so much, because you also don't have to just have one idea at a time. You can have lots of ideas and ask people, everybody, about your different
Mm-hmm.
ideas, and whatever gets the most wow from folks, then then you can really start refining that down and start taking that to the next stage.
Yeah, well
So
said. Well said.
sorry to cut you off on your
No,
point one, but I was loving what you're saying.
no, that's a really good caveat. The second point I was going to say is I already made a comment, and I know you guys are sick of hearing about it, but damn it, you have AI. Use it. Go into ChatGPT and ask it. Say, hey, identify the top 10 companies that provide XYZ service. Spits it out for you. Cool. What was their average earnings income or whatever for the last year on record? You got it. Um, what's the average market size for someone who's looking for bow ties for Shih Tzus? I don't know what it'll say, but it'll produce something. You have all of the knowledge of the world at your fingertips. You just have to reach out and start experimenting with those tools. That's why Tanner and I have been hung up on it for so long. Is yes, it's scary. Yes, it can cause problems. There are a million ways AI can be bad. But what about those ways that it could be really good for you and really allow you to produce that second brain mentality? And what I mean by second brain is I'm Wyatt. I only know what Wyatt knows. I can go out and learn other things and take classes and read books and listen to other podcasts and so on and so forth. And that's wonderful. But I'll only ever have this much knowledge. Um, the internet allows us to have this much knowledge, and AI allows us to have this much knowledge. Like, these are tools that can benefit you. You just have to be ambitious enough to go out to the and play with it and learn it. I won't talk about AI forever, I swear. But you can't honestly say you can't find the answer to something anymore. It's in my opinion, it's an unacceptable excuse. If you Google it and you can't find anything, try AI. And if you still can't find anything on that topic, message me because I'm really curious what you're trying to learn. That's weird. Uh,
This is what I was saying with new tools that are accessible for everybody. These AI tools, I really feel that they're really going to reshape how the world does business. And I think small teams or solo entrepreneurs will be far more disruptive than they've ever been in history's past, just because they do have access to so much more leverage than they did before. So your concept of using AI to validate is super neat, and we can even take that one step further. So you can take whatever plan that you're going with and have AI scrutinize it, but it can have it scrutinize it as different business leaders throughout history from their
mm,
perspectives. So what would War you could have ChatGPT pretend it's Warren Buffett and everything that it knows about Warren Buffett, have it analyze it from that perspective, and then give you feedback as though you were talking to Warren Buffett. Or
mhm,
what about JD Rockefeller or all these different business titans from history's past, getting unique perspectives from them? We're in a whole new paradigm that wasn't possible 6 months ago or a year ago. And so, again, this is where I really truly feel like it's a momentous moment in time for someone to take that leap, because you yourself can have access to so much that you wouldn't have previously. And it is a little bit of a gold rush mentality. So,
yep,
why not?
absolutely.
To keep with quality, too,
Hmm.
one of our previous guests, Lindsay from Paper Moon, branding, the quality in which you present yourself to the world. So if you have a product, you have that validated, something that people truly want to buy, people will judge you off of microseconds of first impressions. So having your branding right, looking that you're much bigger and more professional than you truly are. And I was actually in a conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about Game On. And I've known this guy for 10 years, and he knew that I was part of Game On, that I ran the store and did all this. He didn't realize that Cody, my business partner, and I actually started it. That we built everything from ground. He thought it was a franchise. He thought we just tapped into something so much bigger than what we had than what we actually had because of the level of professional that it looked at, the way we handled things, our systems, our processes, how we operated the business. And so that is something that you can do with e-commerce. If they go into your website or if they go and look at your eBay profile, whatever, and things don't look professional or look trustworthy, they're going to bounce immediately.
Yeah. Um, and that goes hand in hand with what we were just talking about validating ideas. If you have a business idea, step one should not be building a website. You don't know enough. And while there are some wonderful templates out there for the do-it-yourself web page maker, they become obvious, right? And they become, everyone knows about filler text. If you don't fill in a text on a website, have you ever been on a website and you're reading through it and suddenly it starts talking about lorem ipsum, and starts
Yep.
talking in Latin to you? That means they had a template on GoDaddy or something like that and just didn't fill it out. I will immediately lose interest in whatever you're doing if you slap a generic thing on there. Websites are exciting. Tanner, you used to build websites. I think you still do. I've built a few websites. It's fun. It's very creative. It's it shouldn't be in your top 10 list of you wake up in the morning and you decide to start a business. You shouldn't go and build your website immediately after that. There's so much more you need to do it, like validating. But absolutely, another thing and another reason with Lindsay is outside of her branding, her product is top notch, and that's something that I talk about daily in my day job. Is the answer is always, am I providing value to my customer? There's no other question you should be asking yourself. If you're B2B, B2C, whatever, it doesn't matter. If you are not assessing on a regular basis, am I adding value to my customer? If you're not doing that, your business isn't going to go very far, because without customers, you don't have a business, right?
Yeah.
But I was thinking, so on the second one, on delivery, I also have a previous episode example. It comes from DJ of Vacay HQ, who was a trip. I loved having him on this podcast. That man, just super entertaining. And once again, delivery is not about getting something to a customer per se. It's about how fast you can provide that value. If I have an Etsy shop where I make clay figurines or something like that, and someone orders something off of my website and a pop-up says, hey, thanks for your order. Estimated ship time will be in 6 months. They're not going to be very happy, right? And the reason I brought up DJ on this is because I was fascinated by his technique of networking and getting his name and his brand out there was by a blank open invitation on Calendly. And that was his entire marketing appeal. Maybe entire is a strong word, but he was very proud of it. And I was amazed at how successful he was by just having a Calendly, blocking off huge chunks of time and shooting it out to the netherworld and say, hey guys, if you want to talk to me, if you're interested in credit cards, perks, or traveling for free, hey, just book some time. And anyone in the world could go to this website and book time with DJ, who is an expert at credit card perks and traveling off of those perks. And you could pick his brain for free. Is that scalable? No. But what an amazing concept, because I kept commenting it on the podcast episode. He was so available. I could get onto his website and I could book a meeting with him today if his time was open, and for free, pick his brain and understand, I want this credit card, and in 6 months, I'll have enough points to fly to Cancun for free. It's amazing what he was doing and how quickly he just wanted to talk to people and add value. And that's what delivery means to me.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. And I want to touch back on what you were saying about you don't need a website right away. because people immediately think I'm e-commerce, my website's where I make sales. And that's not necessarily always true at the beginning. So, like you were saying with DJ, he found where he actually makes a lot of his sales through different platforms like Calendly or LinkedIn, social media, and these places first, and really focuses on that delivery aspect, making sure he can, from the beginning to the end, the cradle to the grave, deliver something to the customer of value first before he builds all the shiny accoutrement around it that a finished final business may have, because people are always looking at the final result and not like the messy processes in the middle. And the fleshing out the middle part, the actual structure, the systems, the fulfillment parts of it are the most important thing, because that's the experience of the customer.
Hmm.
And you had the perfect example of, you have this gorgeous website with this great copy and maybe a neat product video, and it builds a lot of enticement, and people are like, all right, you got me, I want to buy it. They put in their credit card and it's like, great, it'll be 6 months before we can actually deliver it to you. Well, you
Hmm.
lost that person right there. You spent all that time building the pretty website and building the hype, but you have nothing to back it. It's just a hollow shell. Well, start with the core, which is actually the parts of your business that are the systems and the services and the processes for consistent fulfillment. And this is something from the E-Myth Revisited I really love, where it talks about consistency and almost building your business as though it was going to be a franchise that you were going to sell for other people to run. Because again, the whole point, even if you're never going to franchise it and sell it to other people, is you're going to potentially have employees, because you don't want to have to do everything yourself for every waking hour for all
Hmm.
eternity. You don't want a business to run you. You want to run a business. And building up all of those things allow you then to build very consistent service and support and experience for your customers that's going to let you scale. And again, we're going back to that beginning that e-commerce allows that a small town doesn't, which is scalability. So love that point, Wyatt. Great hit.
No, absolutely. And you know, businesses are nothing but an amalgamation of their processes. Accounts payable, accounts receivable, HR, operations, marketing. Even if you're a one person shop, you have all of those processes, or you have to, because how many of the people have we interviewed? And I'll give you a hint, it's most of them actually ended up making a sale of whatever service or product before they were ready. It's a common theme I'm finding as we interview more and more people, and we really branch out and start learning different areas. More than not, people found their first success before they were ready. And that's because they didn't, and nothing against any of those people. You're all wonderful. I'm very happy for your businesses, but they didn't invest in having those solid processes in the back end, the behind the scenes stuff. Do I have an LLC? Do I have a business bank account? Are my finances in place? Do I have an ability to ship? Can I make invoices? Is my branding logo on my invoice? There's a million little tiny details that, uh, but in respect to all of those people who found those successes before they were quite ready, they got ready really quick, and they suddenly realized, hey, this isn't as complicated as it needs to be. Provide the service as fast as possible and with the highest quality as possible to the customer. We'll work out the rest. You don't need to have a million piece checklist in order to finally launch your business. That's not what I'm saying. But just be prepared. What if you sold 100 units of whatever you're selling tomorrow? Would you be prepared to fulfill that? And something you need to consider.
Something mentioned in our last episode with Dan Hazing, he talked a lot about really focusing on the customer, and something that a lot of people have issues with when they are just focusing on making themselves look professional but not really focusing on the systems and the customer themselves is neglecting customer service. We're often just so focused on getting people to the website and getting that sale, that all the things that need to happen after the sale, and hence delivery, are so incredibly important for you to have repeat business, to you have good word of mouth, to have that scale as well. Wyatt, you want to touch on some of the things that he talked about when it comes to customer success that people could apply in this situation?
Yeah. So, having worked with Dan, I understand his mentality about customers. And Dan and he talked about it then, and I completely agree with him. We go back to data. Customer data is key. One of the biggest projects I worked on when I worked under Dan was we were trying to create a new, it's a new metric for when predicting when a customer was about to leave our service. Um, what is that called when a customer leaves, goes away?
Churn.
Churn. A churn metric, basically. Not a normal churn like, oh, last month we lost 10 customers, shucks darn. We were trying to create predictive data around a customer to predict when they would drop off or if they would drop off. And then that would trigger the customer success team that Dan knows so much about to go in and try and rescue that relationship. And that's what Dan kept doing. And that's what Dan has made a great career out of, is really getting down and understanding the psychology and what this means and why customers leave and why customers stay. And once again, I'll just keep saying it. You could look pretty. You could have the greatest business cards in the world. You could have the most winning smile. But if you don't know your customers and you don't understand your customers, they will leave you for someone else. They will leave. They will find a service somewhere else for someone who understands them and respects them. And that's what Dan really had taught me personally and shared a lot in the podcast, is customers are king. And I know people say it, but it's kind of just become a phrase. Oh, the customer is always right. That's not true. But you do need customers to stay in business. So,
Well, I think the thing with branding is you need to be good enough that you're in the game. So you're at the peer level, but you don't want to spend so much time, money, and effort that becomes your sole focus. That's the distraction, because again, it's such diminishing returns. You can have a good logo or you can have a great logo, and the return is probably a few bonus points. But if you have great customer service compared to you have even just average customer service, those little 10%, 15%, again, that's what gets you from 100,000 views to 5 million views in the whole metaphor Mr. Beast made with how that all works.
Absolutely.
Inventory, Wyatt.
Yeah. So inventory, like I said, inventory can mean a lot of things, but I try to make a blanket statement for products or services, B2B, B2C, doesn't matter. I personally like to use the term inventory for when I leave at 5:00, what will be on my plate tomorrow that was there today? What am I leaving? What work am I leaving on the table? That's inventory. And I harp on inventory the most because of my profession in Lean and Six Sigma. Inventory is the devil. If you have inventory, you are wrong. And the reason you do that is something else, a tangent I've been going down lately. Inventory costs money. And once again, this could be widgets on a cart, things you're making in a manufacturing plant. It could be jewelry you make in your Etsy shop, whatever it is. Or it could be a service you provide, maybe consulting. If you're not getting back to those customers in time, if you're not getting the product shipped out in time, those sorts of issues, they cost you money, they cost you customers. And what I mean by cost you money is not the missed opportunity to sell it and get that revenue in that day. I'm not talking about that kind of money. What I'm talking about, it costs you money, is every single time you or an employee touches a product or service and changes it. You know, they put the wheel on the bicycle, or add the logo to a person's website they're building, whatever business you offer. Anytime a person, you or anyone, touches it, it costs money because you are paying that person, right? Their time, you can calculate an employee's time down to the second, how much it costs per second to have that employee. And this is too deep for most people. This is not a metric most people need to dive into. Unit cost rated by employee, productivity. That's not what I'm talking about. But every time you think about or spend time on something, it takes more of your time, and time is money. That's what I'm trying to get at in inventory. And when you leave work at the end of the day and you still have extra stuff, that's extra time that you're not going to get to tomorrow's tasks because you're dealing with yesterday's tasks. And I have a great example from a previous episode in regards to inventory, which is Mike from Handle Bend. They made those beautiful copper mugs. fun guy to talk to. And I thought of him when I was thinking about inventory, because when they were one of those examples that kind of started hitting it off before they were ready. And by that, they weren't able to produce the number of cups that were being ordered. And these were handcrafted cups that took an individual craftsman a long time to produce. The materials weren't always necessarily readily available. And people started like, wow, these are beautiful. I want one. They told their friends. Word of mouth started getting around their tiny town and further. And suddenly, Mike's like, I can't build this many. We have 100 back ordered. They were the people who were saying, hey, it's going to be 6 months before you get your cup. Not a great look, not a great first introduction to customers. But what he did is he recognized that problem. He tracked that problem utilizing data. And once they were able to build their new shop and he got a few more craftsmen in, they were able to not only, make up that back order, but they then started to produce kind of an emergency stock. And I don't want to go into the details of how much it costs to keep emergency stock, but it's a great problem to have when you have a shelf full of product that you'll get rid of soon versus 100 orders that's going to take you 6 months and a lot of irate customers.
Another example from a past guest is Ben Blecka from Hen Hat and Hero Base Braces. He found really innovative new ways of trying to solve his inventory problem as well. So, like with their custom foot stuff, they found like with iPhones, they're allowed to scan people's feet to build their orthopedic shoe inserts. Something that before you'd have to go to a doctor, and then they realized, well, the doctor vertical really doesn't scale as well as things like shoe stores. So it's really, again, understanding not just what your customers need, but where is the most effective ways to reach your customers as well as distribute your product. There's so many different variables, and just being lean and efficient and creative with these things helps a ton too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just another really neat example, especially if you have physical inventory compared to selling things like software or product services, things like that.
No,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. And then kind of the final point with productivity. So you were talking, part of your inventory concept also goes a little bit to productivity with
Sure.
what's left at the end of the day. And I'm going to go back to that book that I was referencing earlier, and I had to look it up real fast. It's 10x is faster than 2. Sorry, 1 second. I have it up here. Sorry. So I had to look up the book. It's 10x is easier than 2x by Dan Sullivan.
Okay.
And so much of what the book talks about too is we spend so much of our time doing things that are low leverage.
Yeah.
And when you're starting a company, you only have 24 hours in a day. You're competing with the world. And again, you're competing against these large companies with lots of workforce to put behind things. So you need to use your time as focused and most effective as possible. And one of our previous guests, Charles Cormier, was really
We were thinking of the same guy. I
Yep.
knew he would show up for productivity.
Yeah,
Yep.
he's such a good example of cutting out the things that don't matter and focusing on the things that do. And he works at a level that I know I'm not in a place in my life too, where it was back to back to back to back meetings, just because I don't have the mental strength at this stage to do so. But again, you can work just like you work your muscles, you can work your focus and productivity and all these other things up to hit that level. But most of his day, and he talked about with us, was not wasted around just watching videos or just taking random calls, checking his phone, doing things that matter. It was when I get up, I have a certain time and I work until it's a certain time, and then I cut off and I live a very actually productive life after that, or a fulfilling life after that.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are spending 8 hours working, but they're probably only doing 2 hours of work in a day.
Yep.
And if you're taking, you can get away with that when you're working for somebody else. But if you're going to take the leap to start your own company and do things, you're doing yourself an extreme disservice by not actually giving it your all. And you might think that you're busy because you are busy, but you're going to be doing things that really aren't putting you towards your goal. And that's where I really like, again, this idea of 10x effort. If you were going to, let's say you have a business right now, you've been doing it for a little bit of time and you're doing $1 million in sales. how you could get to 2 million is basically just working probably harder. If you want to
Hmm.
increase sales by 10% or 50% or even 100%, you could probably take the same path. But if you want to say, how do you get to 10 million in a different year or in the next year? Well, you have to be creative. You have to go to all sorts of winding non listening. What do you have to give up in your day? Do you have to give up different meetings? Do you have to give up certain clients that are just taking up a lot of your time and not giving you the return? It's a really neat concept of figuring out what you're kind of wasting in your day and focusing on the things that matter.
Bingo. And what Tanner's saying is he's not, because we had another episode called "Hustle Culture is Toxic," and I stand by that episode. What Tanner's not saying you need to work 20 hours a day. You don't need to wake up at 5 a.m. and run 20 miles while listening to inspirational David Goggins and then take an ice bath and then journal and then dive into 20 hours of work. That's not what Tanner's saying. What Tanner's saying is identify, if you have a goal, identify the steps you need to achieve that goal and work it. And chances are good, a lot of the stuff in your life is important, but a lot of it is just waste. I love talking about waste. I won't go down that rabbit hole. Um, but in regards to productivity, Tanner's spot on. If you're starting a business, if you are the owner of a business, you have a lot on your shoulders. You have a lot to do. And you probably don't need 8 hours of 15-minute meetings to accomplish all of that. In fact, you probably only need to highlight a few key things to accomplish in a day, but you work those items and you get them done and you get them off your plate and you move on because they are important and they lead you to that goal. That's not saying you need to work on tomorrow's and ignore your family and stop going to the gym or stop eating healthy because you just need to get this business off the ground. That's not healthy, and you'll burn out. Lots of people burn out starting a business because of that exact reason. It's identifying your goals, identifying what's important to you. Is watching TV for 4 hours a night important to you? If you can say yes, cool, do it. Build your life around that. But if it's not productive for you and you're not finding value in it, that's a really quick thing to change, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a
Yeah.
balance. I don't want people to go workaholic crazy. It works for some people, depending on your situation. For example, if you have children, it's really hard to work 20 hours a day. But just figure out what's important and take those steps and work those steps and try to eliminate that waste in your life, because that waste is time that you could be doing more productive things. And maybe that more productive thing is watching TV, as long as it's valuable to you.
Well, and there's a lot of things that you assume are productive because you're working. And that's really the what we're trying to figure out is what are the things that you can do when you start your company that are high leverage, high influence activities, because you know those people who own their companies and they're always moving, always behind, stressed out, doing those things, but you meet them a year later and they have the exact same problem and their business isn't any bigger. Well, they're just churning on the same stuff. And another book that Dan Sullivan has is the Who Not How. So if there is lower leverage activities, rather than you doing it yourself or figuring out how to do it, just find the right person to do that and offload it. And I know we talked about AI before, but you'd be amazed at the amount of things that you can have AI do for you now that you don't have to do yourself. Going from writing simple forms of documentation and email structures and parsing through data and all this stuff. This is all things that now new tool systems and things will be able to do for you much, much faster. Or you can hire people to help you with these things and you can focus on the big thing, which is growing the company. And again, I'm with Wyatt where I don't want to ever get back into the world where I'm working 100-hour weeks. If anything, if I'm going to start a company again, I want to work 6-hour days, but those 6 hours are filled with the most deep work possible to where I know that I'm not leaving anything on the table. But then I know that I can refresh, sleep a solid amount and come back the next day and hit it just as hard. Because I'll tell you, when I was working 100-hour weeks, most of my days were zombie mode. I was probably, while working 12 to 14, 15 hours a day, only getting 3, 4 quality hours of work compared to slowing down, doing things more effective, being focused on what actually matters, and making those movements. And you can do that in a lot less time than you think. And then you get the rewards much faster, which is much better too, because we're all creatures of input, reward, effort, reward. We want those things. And man, to see something grow and to get this validation is so intoxicating.
Absolutely. So to sum up my point, and then I'll send it over you for wrap up. Back to e-commerce. E-commerce is where it's at. If you want to start a business and scale a business, and by scale I mean get into the 6-7 figure, you have to be online. You can't. I'm sorry, you're not going to be epically successful anymore without being online. Fortunately, it's very easy. I've talking to a lot of people. There's a lot of fear starting in businesses because of, oh, I need to do this and I need to do that and this tool and it's so expensive. And yeah, all those things are true. Simplify, man. QDIP, learn data, make a quality product, deliver it on time, keep your inventory low. And by that, I mean work you have to do to appease your customer, and be productive. Use your time productive. I know they seem simple, but seriously, if you can nail down those 4 metrics in anything, you're going to find success. And once again, damn it, just use the tools. I know AI is scary, but Gold Rush is a great way, Tanner. I love what you said about a Gold Rush. It is a gold rush right now. Get in now, use AI, make it to make your life easier and better and richer. In all sense of the words, richer. These tools are amazing. Just use them. I swear you'll find them valuable. Don't be too scared.
Well, and you said something that really stuck with me is everyone's online.
Mm-hmm.
So e-commerce can be micro or it can be macro.
Yep.
But by doing the fundamental things right, it will give you that scalability. If all you want to do is service a very niche product within a very niche region, you can do that and you can have all of the fundamentals of that still being an e-commerce based business.
Mm-hmm.
You can serve a very small town, but they can order everything online. But the advantage is if you want to spread that out from your town to your county to your region to your state to the United States to the globe, you have that infrastructure and those processes set up that allow you to do that. And that's really the difference, because if you were a traditional brick and mortar store beforehand, the way you would service the next town over is you had to open another store. But by having these software tools and these websites and these services and these platforms do this for you, it enables you to have growth that you would have never had before. So it's really the easier option is to start it online.
Totally. Yeah, great point. Well, thank you for letting me blabber, Tanner. I'll pass it over to you.
No, no. I mean, I think we hit on some really great points. Since we talked so much about prior episodes, I recommend if anyone's still listening to go check out those episodes again. There's so many knowledge bombs that some of our guests have dropped, and it's just been really great. And again, for everybody who's been staying till the end of the episodes, we really appreciate having you. Make sure to like, subscribe. Eventually, I'll start saying like and subscribe at the beginning of the video, where I feel like we have a little bit more engagement, but our audience retention is still being pretty darn great. So
Pretty good.
We probably get quite a few people sticking around to the end. And if you are still here at the end, let us know what you think.
I love you. You're my favorite.
Yeah, stop us in person, message us online, drop an email, whatever you do. We love hearing from you. So thank you so much. We'll see you all next week.